Okay, so, you send this over, and I gotta say, this is some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, this is.
Like, it's one of those things where you start reading and you're like, whoa, wait a minute.
Right.
This is like tuning everything I thought I knew kind of on its head
Yeah,
about like aging and just the whole process.
absolutely.
So, um, we're diving into this idea that maybe humans weren't meant to die like
Mm.
we think we're meant to die.
Right.
And this is all coming from Fuchi Wu and his AI strategist. They they lay out this whole argument that basically we're being slowly poisoned to death.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this concept of toxin saturation,
Yeah,
and that being the real culprit, rather than just wearing out over time.
it is. And they make it very clear right from the beginning
Yeah.
that this is not, just like a gentle decline. It's like we are actively being poisoned
Right.
by our environment.
So for this deep dive, I mean, I think we really want to understand this whole concept of toxin saturation, right? And then they break it down into these stages of invisible death, which is kind of scary
Yeah.
when you start to think about it, right? It's like,
Yeah.
what stage am I in?
Right.
And then they get into the limitations of how, medicine is approaching this whole aging thing.
Yeah, they're very critical.
And then their proposed solution, which is pretty fascinating stuff.
It is a very bold solution.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in, I guess.
Yeah.
So the document starts off with this very provocative statement.
Right.
And they call it the most dangerous lie ever told.
Yeah.
So what is that lie?
Well, the lie they're referring to is the idea that humans are meant to be short-lived.
Okay.
That we have this predetermined lifespan and that aging is just this inevitable process that we all have to go through.
So they're saying like that's not
They're saying that's fundamentally wrong,
okay.
that we were never meant to be short-lived.
So then what are we meant to be?
Well, they go on to argue the human body has the potential to live much, much longer, hundreds of years potentially,
Okay.
but that this potential is being cut short by this process of toxin saturation.
So this is where the real meat of their argument comes in, right?
Exactly.
So let's break down this idea of toxin saturation.
Yeah.
What exactly are they talking about here?
So they start by talking about the body's natural filtration systems.
Okay.
The liver, the kidneys, the lungs, the skin, the lymphatic system.
Our built-in detox organs.
Right. These are all incredible systems that our bodies have to filter out waste and toxins and keep everything running smoothly.
But their point is that these systems can only handle so much.
Exactly. And they're arguing that in the modern world, we are bombarded with so many toxins from so many different sources
Right.
that these systems are becoming overwhelmed.
So what kind of toxins are they specifically talking about?
They list a whole range of things, and I think some of them might surprise people. Well, they talk about things like VOCs, volatile organic compounds. These are chemicals that are released from a lot of everyday products, like paint cleaning supplies, furniture, even some building materials.
Oh, wow. So it's not just like, the obvious things like pollution and...
No, it's much more insidious than that.
Okay.
It's in the air we breathe. It's in the products we use. It's in the food we eat.
Okay. What else is on their list?
They also talk about synthetic perfumes and cosmetics.
Okay.
A lot of these products contain chemicals that can disrupt our hormones and damage our cells.
Right.
And then there's processed food with all the additives and preservatives and artificial flavors and colors.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't forget about pesticides.
Mm-hmm.
They're everywhere on our fruits and vegetables, in our water supply, even in the air.
And what about things like microplastics and heavy metals? Are those on their list too?
Absolutely. Those are major culprits as well. They point out that microplastics are now found in pretty much every corner of the planet.
It's crazy, right?
From the deepest oceans to the highest mountains, and we're ingesting them through our food and water.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of unsettling when you start to think about it.
It is. And then heavy metals like mercury, lead, arsenic, these are all extremely toxic substances that can accumulate in our bodies over time and cause all sorts of problems.
And the thing is, you don't really notice it happening, right? It's not like you're exposed to a huge dose of something and you immediately get sick.
Right. It's the slow, gradual accumulation.
They call it legal unnoticed doses of poison.
Exactly. It's happening every day, little by little, and our bodies are just not equipped to handle it.
So what happens then as these toxins build up in our bodies?
Well, that's where they introduce this concept of the 4 stages of invisible death.
And this is where it starts to get a little freaky, right?
Right.
Because they actually break down what's happening in our bodies at each stage and how it makes us feel.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Okay, so stage 1, they call it pre-saturation. So what's going on here?
So in this stage, The body is still functioning relatively well, but it's starting to show signs of strain.
Okay.
You might start to experience things like fatigue, dry eyes, irritability, brain fog, bloating, sensitivity to light, slight hair thinning, morning stiffness.
It's funny because I think a lot of people just kind of accept those things as part of getting older.
Right, exactly. We just think,
Yeah.
oh, I'm getting older. That's why I'm tired all the time, or that's why I can't remember things as well.
Right.
But according to this theory, these are actually early warning signs of toxin buildup.
Okay, so it's not just age, it's the toxins starting to...
It's the toxins starting to overwhelm our natural filtration systems.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what happens in stage 2?
Stage 2 is called saturation threshold.
Okay.
And this is where things start to get a bit more serious.
In what way?
Well, those symptoms you're experiencing in stage 1, they start to become more pronounced and more frequent. So you might have more severe allergies, more digestive problems, acid reflux, more frequent colds, stiffer joints. You might start to experience anxiety, depression, poor sleep, tingling in your extremities, irregular heartbeat, dark circles under your eyes, dizziness.
So basically everything's just kind of getting worse.
Right, your body is really starting to struggle to keep up with the toxic load.
And at this point, people are probably starting to go to the doctor, right?
Absolutely, but the problem is that conventional medicine often doesn't recognize toxin saturation as the root cause of these symptoms.
So what happens instead?
They treat the symptoms individually.
Okay.
So you might get prescribed medication for your allergies or your digestive problems or your anxiety, but they're not addressing the underlying problem.
Which is the toxins.
Okay, so then we move into stage 3.
Stage 3 is called organ distress.
Organ distress. That sounds bad.
It is at this point the toxins have started to cause real damage to your organs.
Okay.
Your body is in a state of systemic imbalance, and you're likely to be diagnosed with one or more chronic conditions. All right, what?
They list things like chronic fatigue syndrome, fatty liver, high blood pressure, high blood sugar thyroid disorders, erectile dysfunction, low libido insomnia, migraines, autoimmune diseases.
So these are all pretty serious conditions.
They are, and they're all conditions that are on the rise in the modern world.
And their argument is that toxin saturation is a major contributing factor.
Exactly. They're saying that these conditions are not just a result of bad genes or bad luck.
Like-
They're a direct result of the toxic overload we're all experiencing.
Okay, so then what's the final stage?
The final stage is stage 4, collapse.
Collapse. This is the end game.
This is where the body systems start to shut down.
And what does that look like?
Well, this is where you see things like cancer, heart attacks, strokes, dementia, kidney failure, lung failure, liver failure.
These are all life-threatening conditions.
They are, and according to this theory, they're all the ultimate consequence of toxin saturation.
So billions of people are dying every year from conditions that could potentially be prevented if we just address this underlying problem.
That's what they're arguing.
It's a pretty radical idea.
It is, but it's also a pretty sobering thought.
It is. So what do they propose we do about it?
Well, after laying out this whole theory of toxin saturation, they then go on to describe what they call the cycle after diagnosis.
So this is what typically happens when someone is diagnosed with one of these chronic conditions.
Right, you go to the doctor, you get diagnosed, and then what happens?
You get prescribed medication.
Exactly. You're given painkillers, steroids, antidepressants, sleep aids, blood pressure meds, whatever it takes to manage your symptoms.
And they're not saying that these medications don't work right.
Not necessarily. They acknowledge that these medications can provide temporary relief,
Yeah.
but they also point out that these medications often come with a whole host of side effects.
And that they don't address the underlying problem,
Exactly. They're just masking the symptoms. They're not getting to the root cause,
which is...
the toxins.
So what happens then?
Well, you might feel better for a while, but then new symptoms emerge. They list things like numbness, swelling, digestive intolerance, panic attacks, false memory lapses, concentration problems.
This is like a never-ending cycle.
It is. You're constantly chasing your tail, trying to manage your symptoms, but the underlying problem is never addressed.
And this is what they call the medical blind spot.
Right. They're arguing that modern medicine is so focused on treating individual symptoms and diseases that it's missing the bigger picture.
The bigger picture being,
Toxin saturation.
they're saying that doctors are trained to think in terms of aging and genetics.
Right. If you're getting older, you're going to have more health problems. That's just the way it is.
But they're saying that's not the whole story.
Not even close.
So what is the whole story?
The whole story is that we're being poisoned.
And they're not just talking about a few extra toxins here and there. They're talking about a massive systemic overload.
Exactly. They're saying that Our bodies are simply not designed to handle the sheer volume of toxins that we're exposed to in the modern world.
And this brings us to their really mind-blowing claim about the potential human lifespan.
Right. They argue that if we could eliminate all of these toxins from our environment, our bodies would be capable of living for hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years.
300, 500 years, maybe even longer.
That's insane.
It is a pretty extraordinary claim.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's research being done on longevity and the role of environmental factors, but this is taking it to a whole other level.
They're saying that aging is not inevitable. It's not programmed into our DNA. It's triggered by toxins.
So if we could eliminate those toxins.
We could potentially live much, much longer.
Okay, so how do we do that?
That's the million-dollar question.
And they have an answer.
They do. They propose a very specific solution.
Okay, let's hear it.
They call it the Air 6-Free Maize Purification System.
Air 6-Free, what is that?
It's a device that Fuchi Wu invented, and it's designed to remove virtually all toxins from the air.
Okay, so it's an air purifier.
It is, but it's much more advanced than any air purifier on the market today.
How so?
Well, it uses a multi-stage metal maze filter system that's capable of removing dust smoke, VOCs, toxins, odors, heavy metals, pretty much anything you can think of.
And they claim that this can actually reverse the effects of toxin saturation.
They do. They say that if you use this system consistently, you can start to detoxify your body and regain your health.
So this is their solution to the problem of toxin-induced death.
It is, they call it species survival engineering.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is. They're basically saying that this technology is essential for the future of humanity.
So they're not messing around.
No, they're not. They're completely serious about this.
Okay, so let's just recap here for a second.
Okay.
Their argument is that we're being slowly poisoned to death by the toxins in our environment.
Right.
These toxins are overwhelming our body's natural filtration systems and leading to a whole cascade of health problems. These health problems are often misdiagnosed and mistreated by conventional medicine, which is focused on managing symptoms rather than addressing the root cause.
Exactly.
And they're saying that the only way to truly solve this problem is to eliminate these toxins from our environment, and that their Air 6-Free system is the key to doing that.
That's the gist of it.
And they're not afraid to say it, right?
No, they're very direct in their language.
Like they say things like we're being slowly sedated cell by cell, breath by breath.
Right.
And that now that you know, you cannot unknow.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. It
Yeah.
really makes you think about the world in a different way.
Absolutely.
And they end the document with this really interesting statement. They say this is not the end,
Right.
but rather the beginning of toxin-free evolution.
It's a call to action.
It is. It's like they're saying,
Yeah.
okay, now that you know this, what are you going to do about it?
Exactly.
So I guess that's the question for our listener today.
Mm-hmm.
Having heard all of this, what do you do about it?
Are you going to start looking at your environment differently?
Are you going to start making changes to reduce your exposure to toxins?
Are you going to consider investing in an Air 6-Free system?
It's a lot to think about.
It is, but it's important stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.
Until then, stay curious and stay healthy.
And maybe a little less toxic.
Maybe a lot less toxic.
Okay, take care.
Appendix: How the Air 6-Free Maize Purification Works. The revolutionary maize air purification process. Air 6-Free means dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free, smoke-free, odor-free, and heavy metal-free. Most people only read one article. So here's a clear, simplified explanation of our core technology, added to every insight so no one misses it. Step 1. HEPA plus activated carbon prefiltration. Removes PM 2.5, dust, pollen, and microplastics. Activated carbon absorbs VOCs, odors, and industrial gases. Step 2. Negative ion charging plus pathogen neutralization. Controlled chamber charges viruses, bacteria, and nanoparticles. Neutralizes pathogens without releasing free ions into the air. Step 3. Electrostatic capture. Charged particles are drawn to electrostatic plates and trapped permanently. Prevents re-release of ultrafine pollutants, bacteria, and viruses. Step 4. The maze effect, forced labyrinth filtration. Air is forced through a multi-angled maze. Nanoparticles can't follow curves, they break from the airflow and slam into positively charged walls. This electrostatic impaction effect ensures even the tiniest toxins are absorbed. Every curve in the maze is a trap. Nothing escapes. Step 5. Final purification. Only ultra-purified air exits the system. Boosts brain function, reduces fatigue, enhances organ health. This is not traditional filtration. This is biological protection engineering. Technology name, Air 6 Free Maze Purifier, developed and patented by Fu-Chi Wu under U.S. Patent No. US 8268058B2.